changing your life one story at a time. This is the Chicken Soup for the Soul podcast with Editor-in-Chief Amy Newmark.
Hey, it's Amy Newmark with your daily dose of Chicken Soup for the Soul inspiration. It's Motivational Monday, and today I'm going to share a cool story that I think can change your life. There's something about true stories that is so special. They have so much more impact than fiction because they're true and they really happened to someone. And today's story happened to a normal guy, a regular guy just doing his job, but a guy who found the courage to speak up for himself and others, no matter what the consequences were going to be for him. Our storyteller is James Gemmell, and his story is called Small Voice, Big Message. It's from our book, Chicken Soup for the Soul, Hope and Miracles. And I know I keep mentioning that book. It just seems to be an endless source of awesome stories for me to share with you. So here's what happened to James. James was a new electrician in a paper mill, and he was working with guys who had been there for years. One of his co-workers, Fred, was in charge. Fred had been working at the mill more than 15 years. And since James had only been there for 2 weeks, everything was new and interesting to him. And therefore, he was very excited one day when he was told they would be having a maintenance day, because this was going to be a new thing. And on maintenance day, the equipment, which normally ran 24 hours a day, was shut down for one 8-hour shift so that the electricians, James being one of them, could inspect the equipment and make any repairs that were needed. And this was very cool for James, because that day they would be inspecting a bank of 2200-volt electrical controllers. Now, that's a lot of voltage. If you touched one of those while it was on, you would fry instantly. So, of course, there was a safety procedure. The powerhouse operator would lock down that voltage. He would make it dead. And James and his seasoned, experienced, and often opinionated boss, Fred, would wait for the powerhouse guy to tell them that the voltage was off. So James and Fred gathered their tools. They waited for that all clear. And the foreman came along and said, "You're good to go." Now, even though James knew nothing and was supposed to be quiet and obedient because he was the newbie, a little voice in his head told him to speak up and demand absolute confirmation that the power had been shut off. He didn't want to be a jerk. He knew that he was new and that he was a know-nothing, but he just couldn't shake this feeling that he had, this feeling of foreboding. He demanded that someone do a voltage test on those wires to make sure the power was truly off. And this was completely out of the norm for this mill. They never did that test. And the only voltage tester that they had was in another mill that was 2 kilometers away. So now there was a standoff. There was the newbie, know-nothing electrician, James, and he was telling his direct boss, Fred, what to do. And he also had to try to convince Fred's boss and Fred's boss's boss. But for some reason, all those senior guys gave in to James, and it took hours, but they finally got the tester from the other mill. James was in a lot of trouble. He was about to lose his brand new job. When James's boss's boss finally got back with the voltage tester, he was not a happy guy. He was sweating. He was aggravated. They were late to do this 8-hour shutdown. And the boss's boss touched the voltage tester to the wire, ready to show James, the young whippersnapper, that he shouldn't question authority anymore. And the voltage tester lit up like a Christmas tree. Everyone was speechless. The wires were completely live, not shut down at all. So in his story, James describes what happened next. The chief walked over to me, his red face quickly turning white, and he bear hugged me, all the while muttering, "Oh God, oh God." The foreman approached me, shook my hand, and in a voice full of emotion said that he had never been so happy to have one of his orders disobeyed. And my boss, Fred, who seemed to have been hedging his bets up to that point, took over the situation from the 2 stunned supervisors and demanded that we all pay a visit to the powerhouse and get to the bottom of the lockout failure. James says he has no idea where that little voice came from, but he knows it saved his life and probably Fred's life too. He says he's never heard that little voice again, but if he ever does, he won't hesitate to listen to it. So, I've talked about listening to that little voice before and about speaking up, even when it's inconvenient or potentially embarrassing. Sometimes you'll look like a jerk, but what about the times when you're right? That can be major, hugely important. So do it. Go with your gut. I'm Amy Newmark. Thank you for listening to the Chicken Soup for the Soul podcast today. Come back tomorrow for Tip Tuesday. We're going to switch gears. I'm going to give you a simple, perspective-changing tip that will make you love your home even more than you already do. And if you'd like to read more tips from the book I mentioned today, that book I love, Chicken Soup for the Soul, Hope and Miracles, please go to our website, chickensoup.com.